Hello, welcome to GNN, a weekly Fallout-centered podcast by Shoddycast, the makers of the Fallout Lore Storyteller web series. I'm your host, Charles Battersby, and with me is my co-host, Austin Horrigan.
Hello, I'm Austin Horrigan. I have no relationship whatsoever with any super mutants who are crammed inside power armor. Just putting it out there.
For those of you who keep asking.
There's nothing to see here, folks. Just move along.
All right, so we threw out a couple of questions on Twitter this week, and we got bombarded by people who were asking about the interface and some of the new mechanics that are appearing in the combat montage that we saw at E3. So if you look close at that little that combat montage, you'll see that there's a bunch of little telltale signs that Fallout 4 is going to play a little more like a traditional third-person shooter or first-person shooter than Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas did. And one of the things that's been pointed out repeatedly is the character throws a grenade with his left hand and immediately starts shooting with his right hand. And if you look super close on the screen, you can see there's a little grenade icon on the side that's counting down the number of grenades in the character's inventory. So I think that this is a deliberately chosen clip put out there by Bethesda to say, look, we're going to have some more Call of Duty-esque dedicated grenade button features, and that it's going to play a lot more like an action game than the Vats-centric version of Fallout 3. So Austin, what do you think about that?
I actually had not even noticed that until someone pointed it out in our Twitter feed, and I went and found the clip, the section of the clip in question. It's about 52 seconds into that little montage. You see it? I always hated whenever I just had a quick use for a grenade that I had to be like, okay, let's open the Pip-Boy. And I was never good about hotkeying my weapons for quick changes, so it's probably my fault. But having to open the Pip-Boy and then find the grenade that I want after scrolling down was a little bit of, it could put a little bit of a damper on things. So I'm pretty excited that I'm presuming you're probably going to have to be like, here's the grenade I'm using. My primary source grenades are going to be plasma grenades or frag grenades or hopefully Nuka grenades make a return.
Yeah, and in the older games, there's also a animation where you change weapons. So if you do want to switch from, grenade from rifle to grenade, and then throw your grenade, then switch back to your rifle, there's, a couple of little split seconds between each transition that can really get you in trouble when you're in the middle of combat and you've run out of action points.
And as I was going to say, in the original, I've played the original a little bit now, because I felt like I owed it to myself and a little bit to you to play it. And yeah, it feels more that the interruption of combat in that setting, which is it's all turn-based in Fallout 1 and 2. It has a little bit more of a place there, I think, and it fits that mechanical structure. It gets a little weird when you're in the first-person shooter when you're blending that into it, which is kind of the struggle that the Fallout series has had really since Fallout 3, and then there was New Vegas, is trying to find that blend.
Yeah, when Fallout 3 first came out, there were a lot of people on the online forums saying, hey, this game's too hard, why can't I kill anything? and the response would almost always be, are you using Vats? And the person would respond back, Vats? What's that? Is that the thing where I push the V button? And so, people could play it as a third-person shooter or a first-person shooter, but it wasn't really supposed to be played just using, the live-action mechanics. That Vats was integral to it, and if you didn't use Vats, at least at the beginning of encounters, then it would be much more difficult, if not impossible, to get through the whole thing.
I've been playing quite a bit of Fallout 3 and New Vegas again, and New Vegas improved on that quite a bit, and I think part of it had to do with them switching to the true iron sights was very helpful. But I was, when I'm playing through it, I'm trying, because I was playing New Vegas most recently before that, it's so much more tight in New Vegas than it is in Fallout 3. Like, trying to play Fallout 3 as a first or third person shooter is inviting a world of pain, especially in your early levels. Whereas in New Vegas, they tightened it up a little bit.
And the iron sights are back in Fallout 4. And for those of you who haven't played Fallout 3 in a while, if you zoomed in with your weapon, it would, is slightly close up, but it wasn't the proper iron sights where you could line up headshots and play the game in a Call of Duty manner. And now, speaking of Call of Duty and Battlefield, some people pointed out that you can pistol whip people in Fallout 4. There's a brief clip that shows the character holding a handgun, whacking a bad guy in the head, and then whacking him in the head in the opposite direction. So this implies that there's going to be a dedicated melee button. And I also think that the animation that, the character strikes from the right and then does a backhand, I think this is implying that there's going to be some kind of combo system. And at a guess, I'm going to bet that there's some sort of perk tied into that, where if you want to pistol whip people, you're going to need to have a perk or, learn it from a trainer, or, maybe the default mode is that you get that one hit with your pistol, but if you want to do the combo with the backhand, that'll have to come from a perk or by leveling up your melee combat system.
And then in Fallout New Vegas, they had refined unarmed quite a bit, and you could learn special moves and stuff by doing quests and gaining favors from people, and they'd be like, here, let me show you this takedown or this rush, and so I think that was a really good feature, and so if they're gonna, I'd like to see that return as well with the melee system.
Yeah, I felt like New Vegas really put in the effort to refine unarmed combat and hand-to-hand combat, but it still wasn't quite what I wanted it to be. If you really wanted to, to wander the wasteland unarmed, you had to put in a lot of effort as a player in, like you said, the special moves that you could only learn by talking to certain people, as well as leveling up the skill. And it was also difficult to pull off that the interface to do something like the Ranger takedown or the scribe counter. It took a lot of practice to actually learn how to do this. Even though your character knew how to do it, you as the player had trouble just getting the right command entered. All right, now another thing that we've seen in the action montage is the Vats system. And if you look close, Vats is a lot like it was in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, where you can target the limbs, the torso, and the head. And, you said you've been playing the older games, and in the older games, you had even more things you could target with Vats, like the eyes and the groin.
I like that Vats is a little bit less pause, but everyone seems to like that Vats is no longer a pause button.
Right, it's a little more like bullet time now.
Yeah.
In other shooters. Things slow down a lot while you're in Vats, but don't freeze altogether like in Fallout 3 and New Vegas.
And there was something, I especially when I was less good at first-person shooters, not to say by any stretch of the imagination I'm any good now, but I'm a little bit better than I used to be, I exclusively used Vats. And there was something kind of weird about the way it paused. Actually, like sometimes it felt like it was game breaking in my favor, but other times it felt like it was hard to maintain the pace of the battle, and it would be sometimes a bit confusing. And so on top of it being bullet time, and I'm hoping that in general it's just a smoother integration where if I use Vats, I'm not committing myself to something that is going to be that I can't get out of, which was something that happened a lot in the old system. I want to see a feature where you can run, but Vats will target. That's what I want to see. I don't know if it'll be in there, but I want it really bad.
But it's a good thing to call Bethesda out on, that it would be neat to see this where you can enter in what you want to shoot, and then you control the character while Vats controls the shooting. I would often have situations where I target the enemy and then, carefully, plan all of my shots, and then the character just shoots into the wall right in front of them or shoots into a table because, Vats tells me I've got a 95% chance of hitting that character, in the arm, but when it plays out in reality, the character takes half a step to the side, and now my character is, aiming at a refrigerator that's right in front of them, or, aiming at the, the door jamb.
Well, that's the 5% right there.
All right, so people were also asking about the sprint feature, and for those of you who played Fallout 3 in New Vegas, you know you can't really do that. Your only option for running faster is to holster your weapon. By the time Skyrim rolled around, Bethesda had added a sprint feature that's tied to your stamina. So in Fallout 4, Austin, apparently you found a screenshot that specifically details how sprint will work?
Yes, there is a screenshot of the character creation, and when he hovers over endurance, there's a little description under it that says endurance is a measure of your overall physical fitness, which there we go, we all knew that. It affects your total health and the action point drain from sprinting. So it looks like sprinting is not only a thing, but it will drain your action points, which is nice because I think it gives action points a use to people who have no interest in Vats on top of it.
Yes, and if you, those of you who play on the PC, you may remember some older mods that came out right after Fallout 3 was released, things like Fallout Wanderers Edition and the Fallout Overhaul Kit. These actually added in these features. Right, and there's one other feature that a couple people have mentioned, and I don't think we've had any official comment on it from Bethesda yet, but they want to know about dual-wielding weapons.
I saw that question. I looked for any information about it. I couldn't find anything other than speculation and hopes. There's absolutely, as far as I've seen, no confirmation that it will exist. I'm not sure I want it to be honest. It doesn't totally, like, it seems like kind of a novelty, and I think it'd be too hard to implement dual wielding into the world of Fallout unless they were gonna keep it with melee. But I could be totally wrong. I mean, dual wielding is, if you pull it off right, it's really showy and people like it, and your favorite action hero dual wields weapons, everyone gets excited, so maybe I'm wrong. But there's no official confirmation yet that I've seen anywhere.
All right, now I do a little writing on an upcoming mod called Fallout Lone Star, which is set in Texas. And, you know, for them, they want to keep the gunfighter theme. So they do have dual wielding in that mod, or at least they'd consider dual wielding. And one of the things that they've done for that is the Plasma Defender is a one-handed plasma pistol that automatically recharges itself after a certain amount of time. So their theory was, well, if you got two of those, you could just fire and you could keep dual wielding and never have to holster them to reload. But now Fallout 4, they're their own dev team. They could just implement this feature if they wanted to. It's pretty common in shooters. But the Halo franchise ran into a lot of trouble with dual wielding when they introduced it in Halo 2. And, for those of you who think back to when Halo first arrived, the mechanics were basically you shoot, you have melee, and you have your grenades. And in Fallout 2, by adding in the dual wielding, well, you couldn't melee unless you dropped the gun in your offhand. You couldn't throw a grenade unless you dropped the gun in your offhand. So they ran into big balancing issues where people were, so focused on just having two submachine guns or two pistols that they stopped playing with the other mechanics. So I think with Fallout having so many guns and so many mods for the guns, it'll be a real balancing nightmare for them if you can have two modified guns, one in each hand, and if you think back to, something like Knights of the Old Republic, where, you could have these hyper-specialized guns that you've created, and, this one destroys shields, and this gun, it goes through armor, and, if you switched back and forth between them, you could really wreak havoc with the game's, enemies, just because you're kind of, cheating with two min-maxed weapons.
And all these new features really kind of inform the comments that Todd Howard said in an interview shortly after E3, when he described the shooting system in Fallout 3 as meh. So it seems like the powers that be think it's really important to focus on these mechanics, and I definitely, I've changed my thoughts on mechanics quite a bit as I've matured as a gamer, in that I do think they're important. Like, story can't be everything. Like, if your game feels clunky, people are going to walk away from it and they're not going to get to enjoy a good story. So I do hope that they are not just focusing on mechanics and then letting the plot fall by the wayside due to budgeting issues and whatnot. That, again, we'll wait to see until it comes out. I'm a little concerned about it, but at the same time, shouldn't be tolerating crappy mechanics. Like, you just shouldn't.
So I want to touch on something that we spoke about last week, the possibility of updates for Fallout Shelter. And so just hours before we sat down to record this, I got a little note on my Fallout Shelter game that told me that a new character with a new outfit and a new weapon were now available in Fallout Shelter. So I think that we are going to see a steady trickle of these little mini updates where you can recruit characters from Fallout 4 into your Fallout Shelter and get new stuff. So this is about 2 weeks after the game came out, and it seems like they're going to be running out these little mini updates. So I'm hoping that we'll have at least a weekly excuse to come back in and poke around with the game if it's just, to get this new character.
And that's what I was going to ask you, is to you, is that enough to keep you interested?
Yeah, I think it's enough to encourage me to check in with my vault, twice a day. At this point, I think I've done everything that there is except getting this one new guy. All right, so now I'd like to go on to artsy-smartsy stuff. So this week we're going to be talking about the novel and the movie On the Beach.
On the Beach is a novel from the 1950s, I believe I can't remember if it's 1958 or 1956. And they made a movie in 1959, and it's people in Australia, I believe.
Yes, it's a group of Australians. There's also British Navy and American Navy. And the premise is that a nuclear war has occurred, and the radioactive fallout has killed almost everyone in the world, and it's slowly traveling south because of the weather patterns. So it's set in the southern tip of Australia. In the movie, apparently this little chunk on the southern coast of Australia are the only people left in the world. In the book, there are people in other parts of the southern hemisphere that are slowly disappearing over the course of the book.
The interesting thing you mentioned about irradiation spreading through the planet based on the weather systems is that that's actually based on a legitimate fear that theorists had regarding the atom bomb prior to its drop. Which is interesting to see adapted into a concept after we already know what one bomb will do. Although, as I understand it, the novel involves more than just one bomb dropping.
Right. The novel, it's we don't fully know what happened. All the survivors and all the characters in the novel, they're away from America and Russia. But apparently, Russia and America nuked each other for unknown reasons, and now there's just these small groups that are left.
Every time you are exposing me to these influences to post-apocalyptic storytelling, I'm amazed at how old some of them are. Because to me, it was like Mad Max, like in my brain, was like the first, and it wasn't at all the first, even remotely. And it's interesting to see just how deep the writers of Fallout dig for all those references.
Yes, and now speaking of Fallout-related references, I don't want to spoil the movie for you, but a Coca-Cola bottle plays a very important role in this movie. And so I think that this is just screaming to have a Nuka-Cola reference. So when Fallout 4 comes, we're going to need to have fans see On the Beach and then scour all the levels in Boston to see if one of the level designers just put in a little reference to this one Coke bottle scene in this movie. And I wouldn't be surprised to find out that maybe one of the previous games they actually put in a nod to this and just no one noticed because it's so subtle. Listeners, see the movie, and when the game comes out, look everywhere in Boston just to see if you can catch this one little visual gag. Okay, we're going to be back with a special celebrity guest in a few minutes, but first, if you feel like you're a little dumb each week when we do the Artsy Smartsy segment, here's an important message from Medtech.
This is Sally. 6 months ago, Sally was an ordinary girl who enjoyed baking cupcakes with Mom and playing with her neighborhood pals. But Sally felt like she wasn't as clever as the other children. That's when her new friend, Butch, offered her something called Mentats. They looked like candy, but they were actually recreational chemicals, or chems for short. The Mentats made Sally feel like the smartest girl in the world, but only for a little while. When they wore off, she felt dumber than ever, and before long, she was nothing but a hooligan, a criminal, a dope fiend. It could happen to your children too, even with just one mentat. So store your chem safely and out of the reach of children. The proceeding was a public service message from Medtech, makers of the Fixer anti-addiction pills, now available at your local Super Duper Mart.
And welcome back. This week on GNN, we have a celebrity guest. Please welcome voice actor Ken Kennan.
That's me! How you doing, guys?
Now, many of our listeners may recognize your voice from a certain project that's related to Fallout. Can you tell us a little bit about your work on this mystery project?
Oh, mystery. Well, I am also known as the mysterious storyteller, I suppose. People wouldn't recognize me just by my regular talking voice because the mysterious storyteller is not my regular voice, surprisingly enough. It's more of a deeper, gruffer version, I guess inspired a little bit by Ron Perlman's narration from the original Fallouts, I suppose, but completely gone an entirely different direction.
And also, we played a little joke on the listeners a couple weeks ago. You guest starred playing Howard Braunschweiger as well.
Right.
I'm kind of hoping that maybe, you know how in Fallout 3 they have the two superheroes that are people who are dressing up as superheroes. I'm really kind of hoping that there is a Grognak impersonator in the next one, in Fallout 4.
That'd be awesome.
So a whole swarm of antagonizers that patrol the wasteland.
Yeah, it's Grognak versus the antagonizer. They're crawling all over me! Get them off of me!
Can you tell us a little bit how you got involved with the Fallout lore series and got cast to be the storyteller?
Well, I guess I auditioned. There's an online working platform was called Odesk. Now it's called Upwork. And Mr. Joshua Yeba, who is your main guy for Shoddycast.
The talented and handsome Joshua Yeba.
The talented, handsome, and super sexual Joshua Yeba found me through that platform, and I sent in various little audition options, and he liked the sound of me, and that was the end of 2013 now, I think. So it's been we're coming up on 2 years worth of Fallout lore yumminess. But I mostly do voices for audio books and selling your nutrition products via your website, and if you're looking to lose 50 pounds in 27 minutes without chopping off a limb, here's what you can do. With various when people want to advertise their stuff, they'll come to me. I've done, I couldn't even tell you how many states I've done for DMV driving training seminars that last somewhere between 6 to 35 hours.
I've been on your website, and my personal favorite clip that I ever listened to of yours was you were pushing some sort of it was like tricks for dating or something like that, but it was like one of those kind of somewhat shady advertisements. Is like, hey, you want to know how to get the ladies for real, right? Quit playing around on the internet.
Oh, was it the one for how to find the best hookers in Thailand?
Oh my gosh, no.
Goodness, it was broken down into like 20 different 5-minute increments of how to find whatever the best nightclub was in Bangkok.
For those of you who have never been to Thailand, there are two kinds of taxi drivers. Those that honestly follow the taxi meter in the car, and those who look for foreigners and refuse to use the taxi meter. The latter of the two try to charge the foreigner up to 10 times the amount of what it should cost. Here's a quick guide on how to almost, get a fair price on a taxi in Bangkok.
So speaking of the exciting fun work, we're actually bringing in a whole voice cast of voice actors for Season 3. Those of you who've been watching Season 3 of Fallout lore, The Storyteller, we have a new pal named Helen Tanner. and also some recurring characters that haven't yet been introduced as of this week. Actually, Helen Tanner is a reference to the book Damnation Alley that we discussed last week. So for those of you wondering what that's about. But as for recording the voiceovers, can you tell our listeners a little bit about what it's like recording the voice work when there's a cast? You're presumably not in the same room with the other actors, is that right?
Yeah, I do everything in my my home office, which is in the center of my house. It's a retrofitted small little room. Somebody could be sleeping in here theoretically, but not with all my crap I've got laid around in here, and got my computer and microphone set up, complete with pop filters and all the like. So I do most of my recording. I've got to do in the wee hours of the night, so that I don't have the stuff that's showing up in the background like you have with the motorcycle and the garbage trucks and whatnot. And even right now, it's 109 here today. It's in the middle of California, 109 freaking degrees. And I cannot have the air off in the middle of the day. So what I do is most of my recording is usually between about midnight and 4 a.m. when I can have the air off, when there are no garbage trucks outside, when people aren't deciding they're going to use their leaf blowers and blow off their driveways, and the motorcycles zooming up and down the street. So that's the dead of the night, and I can get all my base raw recording done throughout, usually about a 4-hour stretch is about as much as my voice can handle at one time to do a variety of the stuff that I go through, from the high, the low, the gruff voices to the boring, mundane voices. About 4 hours is all my voice can handle at one time. Then the next day is when I do all my patches and edits, piece everything together, make sure I haven't made mistakes. So there's no possible way for me to be able to sync up my recording with anyone else out there, because we probably don't even have the same wake and sleep schedules, let alone being in the same state, let alone being, anywhere near within driving distance to be able to operate in the same environment.
I know I've seen some people have been interested to know the role that you have. What's the relationship that you have with developing the character with Charles? Like, Charles, do you, as the series has evolved, have you kind of gotten a sense for his vocal range and kind of developed a character there? Do you guys collaborate a little? I was kind of curious what that dynamic was.
Charles had asked me a few times ahead of time of what I had in my ability, and even one point not very long ago he asked, "Can you sing by any chance?" And then I responded, "Well, not really. I'm kind of a master of the spoken word as opposed to the master of the sing-songy word, but I could pull off something, and if it was along the lines of the mysterious storyteller, I could probably pull something off the lines of I even threw out there a Johnny Cash type of song or something like that, I'm sure." And he suddenly went click, and he said, I'm gonna make sure the storyteller sings something in the vein of Johnny Cash at some point in time.
Yeah, that was our season premiere of the third season.
Ed was chosen by the Overseer, a paragon who had no peer, a champion who'd never lost a fight.
The writing process, it almost always involves me sending an email to Josh, who's the director of the project, and half of my emails have a subject line that says, "I have a crazy idea." And so so basically Josh's job is to kind of reel in my insanity and force me to write things that the viewers can tolerate. And starting, I guess these are written about, they used to be written about 2 months ahead of time. So those first couple of episodes from 2 years ago, it was about 2 months from the time I started writing them to the time they got online. So I guess around the 4th or 5th episode of the series was the point where I started hearing your voice in my head as I'm writing the narrator's dialogue. And back then, the character was just called the narrator. We didn't have the storyteller. Then, just as I got more familiar and could hear him saying every line that I write, I started writing with that specific tone and character. And longtime listeners will, they'll remember the voice has slowly changed a little bit, and the kind of accent and colloquialisms have slowly changed over the years.
If you want an example of how far in advance, I recorded on the 22nd, I recorded season 3, episode 8.
As of recording, episode 5 is out. Episode 6 is going to be coming out at the end of the week. So yeah, that's actually quite a lag time.
Episode 10 was just sent in and just written and sent in a couple of days ago. So I guess it's about 2 weeks from the time I send it off to the time you finish recording it, and then 2 weeks before the public gets to see it. All right, well, it's been great having you on the show today. We hope you can come back again and join us.
Thank you, guys. Have a great time, and looking forward to very next episode of The Mysterious Storyteller. But that, as we all know, is a story for another day.
All right, that was Ken Kennan, the voice of the Mysterious Storyteller, as well as the voice of Howard Braunschweiger here on GNN. All right, now it's time for another weekly segment called User Questions. So we posted on Twitter. If you have any questions, throw them at us. So at Gordon for Riemann writes, Fallout 3 DLC was awesome. What DLC do you think would be great for Fallout 4 post-launch? So, Austin, what kind of DLC do you think is going to happen, or do you just hope it's going to happen?
I recently took over the mantle of the social media for Shoddycast, and I posted an article on the Facebook page about the multiplayer that they had tested, and I kind of asked people, how long do you think this will be till they mod it in? That mod is the one I want to see. I want to see multiplayer, if it's even if it's just LAN multiplayer, be able to play. It's probably a little unreasonable, but it would still be pretty cool, I think.
All right, and I'm hoping for DLC that's going to be based in other big cities that have been referenced in the Fallout universe. If they're building all these cityscapes for Boston, then is it so outlandish that we could expect them to finally address the Chicago Brotherhood of Steel chapter? Or I am also really hoping that Fallout does a New York mission in some DLC pack, because I live in New York and I'd love to see what they can do with my town here. At Manpon the Medic has a great observation. He points out that the Fallout 4 player character is pre-war Army vet, and that the Brotherhood of Steel is Army-based within the games. So I think it's a great observation. Last week we talked about power armor and power armor training. So your character may not need power armor training within the game. You could start out with, maybe that suit of armor in the garage is your suit of armor from before the war. And we'd also talked about Buck Rogers' influences, that in the future they needed his help because of his pre-war military experience. So I think Manpon the Medic has made a really good observation that maybe your character is like the guy that knows how to use power armor, and he's going to be the one that teaches other people how to use it.
That's really astute. I like it.
Yes. And there, for those of you who know the backstory of the Fallout games, their power armor was used to fight the big battles in Alaska. They were also, used by Roger Maxson, who founded the Brotherhood of Steel, and, his soldiers. And they were also used, apparently, against, pre-war hippies and protesters to quell opposition. All right, and if you have user questions of your own, feel free to tweet them to Shoddycast or tweet them to me or Austin directly. All right, so now it's time for a section of the show that we call Irresponsible Speculations. Now, one of our Twitter followers, at DorkGetReal, wrote, "What perks do you think the game should include?" And now some of this has been actually answered. If you look super close at the chart of perks in the garage, about 24 of those perks use the same icon as perks from the old game. So people have actually determined that things like Bloody Mess and Mysterious Stranger and 22 others are returning. But now, Austin, what kind of perks do you suspect might be in? Please give us your most irresponsible speculations on what the mystery perks might be.
All right, I've thought long and hard about this, and I have the perfect answer. Have you seen Batman Returns? And you know that there's, if you've seen it or if you haven't seen it, there's the Penguin is the main villain of that, and he has these penguins that have little rockets on their backs. I think you're going to be able to unlock a perk that allows you to craft a rocket onto the back of your canine companion, and he'll be able to just shoot it at your enemies like some sort of mortar of death. That's what I think is going to happen.
I think that that's absolutely going to happen. And in fact, we should be enraged if Bethesda doesn't include it.
It would be unethical and lacking in integrity of the developers to omit something like that.
All right, so the perk that I think should be included is robosexual. We've had a lot of speculations that androids are going to be an important part of the storyline, so I think we need a perk or a trait called robosexual that lets you romance not just the androids, but any robot you find in the game.
I love that, and I think a Fallout 4 sans being able to romance a Mr. Handy is not a Fallout 4 that I want to play.
Yes, why would they call him Mr. Handy unless it's an innuendo?
Mr. Handsy.
All right, so on that, if you have user questions or any irresponsible speculations you'd like us to work on, you can feel free to stalk us online. You can leave comments in the YouTube page right here, or you can stalk me at Charles Battersby with no Y on the end. And Austin, where can they stalk you?
You can find me at AR Horrigan, or tweet at ShoddyCast, or right on the Facebook page. I will get back to you as quick as I can, which is usually, as long as I'm not asleep, pretty darn fast.
And don't forget to tune in this Friday for a new episode of The Storyteller with weekly episodes that will be running right up until the release of Fallout 4. And remember to join us every weekday morning at 10 o'clock for Mr. Handy's Robot Kitchen, brought to you by Blamco. I'm Charles Battersby.
And I'm Austin Horrigan.
And this has been GNN. Thank you for tuning in.